He's a retired law enforcement officer from Alaska. Part of his job was being a hostage negotiator. He had to negotiate the arrest of two notorious serial killers, Joshua Wade and Israel Keys. He's here to tell us the inside scoop. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is brought to you in part by the Breakfast with Champions rooms in the Clubhouse drop-in social audio chat app. The app is free. Download today. Look for Clubhouse and be sure to follow and join us in Breakfast with Champions, holding rooms every day of the week. You'll find friends from all over the globe. Motivation, education, inspiration, where everyone gets to see the table. That's the Breakfast with Champions rooms in the Clubhouse drop-in social audio app. Both are free. Download the app today. Get more details at the bwcinfo.com. Joining us on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we're going all the way to Alaska. Retired Anchorage, Alaska police officer Doug Pfeiffer. Part of his career, he's a hostage negotiator. He negotiated successfully the arrest of two serial killers, Joshua Wade and Israel Keys. We'll talk about that. He's also authored the book 50 Shades of True Crime. His website is DougPfeiffer.com. Doug, thanks for being a guest on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Number one. Number two, thanks for your service. Both very much appreciated.
Well, John, thanks for having me. And again, thanks for your service. I appreciate it.
And I've seen a little bit of television shows about policing in Alaska, and I have no idea what you guys do. None. It's like, I watch the Alaska State Troopers, and I'm like, man, they fly everywhere. We didn't do any of that stuff. I mean, it's a totally different world up there, isn't it?
It's pretty different. I mean, you got the cold, the mountains, the terrain. So it's definitely different than your city policing for sure.
And Anchorage it's a big city. Might be in Alaska, but we don't tend to think of it as being a big city with big city problems. But it does have that, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Anchorage is about 330,000 people, so pretty significant size. Some of the communities that are surrounding us are much smaller, but Anchorage is a regular town like everywhere else. What
part of the state are you in?
I live in Anchorage. I was born in Homer. That's about 260 miles south, and that's a town of about 5,000 people, so that one's pretty small.
Okay. So is Anchorage like in the southwest portion of the state, or I'll be honest with you, Doug, I don't know squat about Alaska.
Well, I think you ought to get on a plane and get up there. It's the most beautiful state in the Union.
Yeah, maybe the summertime, all 2 weeks of it.
Yeah, I would go. We do joke about that. I'd go May through July. I think you'll be fine. Other than that, you're in trouble.
Well, my daughters live in South Buffalo, New York, and I always tell people I love that area of the country in the summer. In the winter, not so much. And it's not that I got anything against winter and snow. I used to love it, but I've become allergic to that stuff nowadays.
Yeah, I think as you get older and you've been there a long time, I think I'd become allergic to it too.
Yeah, I live in Florida now, so the weather suits me much better. And my wife, the boss, by the way, she likes the longer days, the more sunshine. She likes the warmer temps. She doesn't like that cold. And you guys, let's go back to Alaska, because one of the things I do know about it, I spent many years in radio in Key West, Florida, and we seem to get a lot of people there running from the law. That's the last stop for them. The other location is Alaska. Am I wrong there?
No, actually, you're 100% right. I think it's that concept that Alaska is free and independent, which we are, but that doesn't mean as a criminal you get to come and rain terror down in the state. So I think we get a lot of, I say, strange individuals that come up, end up committing crimes, thinking they're going to get away with them because the state's so large and they have so much, roaming territory to commit these crimes. But we eventually get them. But we get that a lot, which is strange to me. But I think they just think it's a place they can get away with it.
Maybe they feel like no one knows who they are there, and there's not a thing like NCIC and computers and all that stuff. And maybe they think you guys are in the dark ages and you don't have computers.
I think they do, but I think Alaskan cops are pretty smart. We've caught up with the rest of the country.
I think so too, and I'll be honest with you, I get the impression, and I'm not saying this to blow smoke, I get the impression that a lot of the Alaskan police, the different agencies, they're used to doing a lot more with a lot less people than, say, we had in Baltimore.
Yeah, you're spot on. I think the difference between Alaska and major cities is, as a patrol cop, you might even work a homicide scene, start it and do glass warrants or investigations, whereas most city cops in big cities will call in detectives and different officers to handle various units. But by design, Alaska is so large, you might be stuck on something by yourself for a while, and you have to do it.
So how many years did you do as a police in Alaska?
I did 25 years with the Anchorage Police Department.
That's a long time. That's a really long time. And I saw something, I don't know how accurate this is, but they said, and I'm paraphrasing, the average American sees two critical incidents or experiences two critical incidents in their life. A police officer gets anywhere from 700 to 1,000 in 10 or 20 years. Is that accurate for you?
I think that'd be pretty accurate. It's constant on the job, especially what type of response teams you're on, any specialty teams. You might be going out, virtually every other night. As a negotiator, I was on some pretty hardcore calls that I would call extreme incidents, and that just becomes second nature because you're called out so often and you got to work them. But I'd say that's probably right.
I think in the 7 years I've been doing the Law Enforcement Talk radio show, I think you're the third guest that was policing in Alaska. So that's how rare the guests are from the great state. And by the way, that was the 49th state, wasn't it?
You're exactly right, yeah. Largest state, 2.5 times the size of Texas. We like to brag up here in Alaska.
Well, we say this jokingly down here in Florida. You might be bigger, but you're colder and a lot more desolate. You got more polar bears than you got people, don't you?
We almost have more moose than people. That's one. There's about 200,000 moose roaming Alaska. So our state population is about 700,000. So that's a lot of moose per people.
Now, before we get into your experience, we're going to talk a little bit about television. I happened to watch this series a while ago, Ice Road Truckers. So I kind of feel like I know a little thing or two about Alaska. Does that do a fair job of presenting what it's like up there in the wintertime?
It does, and I'll give you a little tidbit that you don't know. My brother, Larry, lives in North Pole, Alaska, which is right outside of Fairbanks. He is an ice road trucker, so he drives that haul road up there. So I know a lot more about this than most people. So interesting you say that because I'm quite familiar with it. It's brutal up there. He'll send me pictures of 60, 70 below zero with the road washed out or blown out by snow with the sea crackling underneath of them. That's pretty intense. I'm glad I was a cop and not an ice road trucker.
No, there's no way I could do that. I'll be honest with you, Doug. I watched that show a long time ago, and I'm like, oh, my God, it's cracking under you. What happens if your vehicle stalls and it shuts down, and you're out in the middle of nowhere, and it's like 30 below zero?
I'd say you're in some trouble. They do carry some cold weather survival gear, and then, with satellites and phones, they're pretty good with contact and getting emergency help, but that would be a pucker factor incident. I will tell you one cool story about my brother and one of his truck hauls. They have food almost like restaurants up there, and truckers, after you drive 18 hours, you can stop and have a meal in these. They're just like restaurants at the tip of Alaska. And what he does when he parks his semi, he does a walk around. It's usually dark out, just to check all the lights, make sure there's no flat tires. They leave the vehicles running by necessity because they'll freeze up. So as he walked around this vehicle, his truck, he didn't find anything unusual. He went into the restaurant style and had dinner. A security guard that works up there came in and said, "Did you just see what happened out there?" And he's like, "No, I didn't see." As he was circling his truck, a polar bear was stalking him around his truck. Never attacked, but it followed him all the way around. And when he told me that story, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be out on that. Without a gun, I don't think that's a good position to be in.
No, I don't think. Look, there was a point in my life where I didn't mind. I kind of liked chasing guys or arming guns, shooting at people, gunfights that did murders. But polar bears, no, that's not up my alley. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We're talking with Doug Pfeiffer. He is a retired Anchorage, Alaska police officer, author of the book 50 Shades of True Crime. His website is Doug Pfeiffer, FIFER.com. And we're turning the conversation. We're talking about hostage negotiating with serial killers in Alaska. He's here to tell us the inside scoop. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
First thing in the morning on my phone, I join the Breakfast with Champions morning show in the Clubhouse social audio app. Both are free. I can grab my coffee, no makeup, no hair to do, and connect with people live from all across the world to jumpstart my day. Join us in the Breakfast with Champions rooms in the Clubhouse social audio app.
Online at www.thebwcinfo.com.
There's a couple ways you can stay in touch and keep informed of what's going on with the Law Enforcement Talk radio show. Number one, go to our website, letradio.com. Sign up for our email newsletter. It's real easy to find. I promise we don't spam you. I send out about one email every 2 weeks or so. And there's also a feature called Broadcast Channels on our Facebook page, where we send messages directly to your inbox, directly to your messenger. Real easy to sign up for. Make sure you like or follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show Facebook page. And up top, you'll see broadcast channels, one for free podcast versions of the radio show, another one top post of the day. So you too can stay informed quickly, easily, and best of all, like always, free. Return our conversation on the Law Enforcement Talk radio show with Doug Pfeiffer. Doug is an interesting character. He is a retired Anchorage, Alaska police officer. That'll blow your mind, right? 25 years on the job. He is author of the book 50 Shades of True Crime, which should blow your mind. His website, if you need your mind blown even more, is DougPfeiffer.com. That's Fifer.com. And his brother is a nice road trucker. I mean, what else do you need? The only thing missing right now is a man cave and some beverages. That's all we need to complete this trifecta. Well, part of your job as a police officer in Anchorage was you're a hostage negotiator. And what does that cover?
That's one of the core assignments I had for the latter part of my career. I stayed as a hostage negotiator for all the way up to the end. And the reason being is because out of everything I've ever done in law enforcement, that's what I love the most. It kind of came natural to me. I had the gift of gab with people and suspects. So when you love something and naturally you're pretty good at it, you kind of tend to lean into it, and that's what I did. So I was a team leader for our Anchorage team. What's unique about our team is we're the largest in Alaska. So even for the FBI or troopers or other agencies, they would call out our team because we were large enough and we had the training and background. So we might negotiate all over Alaska, although our main territory was Anchorage. And I just love doing it. I think it's kind of gamesmanship when you interact with a suspect, whether they're holding hostages, whether they're threatening suicide or threatening harm on others. It's kind of that back and forth, and you need to get them out safely to protect the victims or society. If you don't, then that's a real problem. And so it's really, you have to concentrate, but mentally it's fatiguing. I remember I always felt well after a negotiation, and then about 10 minutes later was that mental dump, and I was completely exhausted. I hadn't realized how taxing it is on your mind to negotiate for a long time.
Well, that leads me to a question.
That's how I got into it.
That leads me to a question, is that, number one, before I start the question, a statement, we always want to negotiate with people. We didn't want to use force. We certainly didn't want to use deadly force, but even physical force of any time, because that meant a lot of writing. It's something we didn't want to do. So whenever possible, we would talk to people. We talked them down. Perfect example is the suicide, the jumper, all those things we see. But the question is, we watch on television, they always pit like the SWAT guys and the hostage negotiator guys. They're at odds with each other. Like the SWAT guys just want to go and shoot stuff up, and the hostage negotiators, wait, I can talk them out of it. And they have the megaphone, all that stuff. And how accurate is that?
It's true. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times, especially as a team leader, if I'm not negotiating, my job is to interact with command staff and get that additional time before we send in the SWAT team and take a tactical maneuver to get in there. And, somebody's going to get shot, they're going to get hurt, our officers are in danger. So that was a constant back and forth battle between myself and command staff on giving me a little bit more time. I would teach new negotiators that the biggest weapon we have as cops is our mouth.
Right.
And we have guns, batons, pepper spray, tasers. Those are all good. But our mouth really can de-escalate most things. And I was pretty good with command staff, so we got the extra time needed. And there was very few instances where our negotiations didn't quite work out. I mean, nothing's perfect in life, so we had some hiccups. But I think as a whole, we were very good. But that interaction, that push and pull, you're exactly right. I mean, it happens all the time.
The other thing is, I would imagine, I'm not sure how to phrase this. I don't want this to come across as I'm looking down on anybody. I was not a hostage negotiator. It's a different skill set. And we try to talk everybody down. And thankfully, most of the time it was successful because the bad guys, and I'm air quoting the bad guys, they didn't want to end it violently either. There's very few people. Here's the one I always got. And this, I guess, is a good question. I'm going out in a blaze of glory. If I'm going out, I'm shooting police too. And 99% of those people were just talk.
Yeah, I think most of them are. But again, I think that 1%, we never know who they are. So you got to go through the same process entirely, walk them through it, why they want to hurt cops, why they want to hurt others, and really get them to where they need to be. And what I would always tell negotiators, and what I use with my own negotiations, is be very truthful and honest with the suspect. If you killed somebody and I'm negotiating with you and you ask him, am I going to go to jail? I'm not going to say no because
right.
You're smart enough to realize that's a lie. So what I'd say is, whatever your name is, you're going to have to answer for your crimes. I may not say you're going to go to prison for 300 years because that's not going to sound very good to them. But I wouldn't lie to them, and I think eventually that's respected because they understand that they're going to face some type of justice. And that's a good technique by a negotiator, is to use that and be honest. It's rare, only one time in my career that I ever have to use a lie, and that was in an extreme circumstance. But most of the time, be honest, it'll work out well.
Well, very quickly, and we'll go into your story about Joshua Wade and then Israel Keys. We have time. There was back when I was still a patrolman, it was Valentine's Day of all days. It was wintertime in Baltimore. And what a lot of people did then was they would open up their ovens and get extra heat. And a woman was in the kitchen. She had a straight razor. She was threatening suicide. And I was the lead officer, was on my post. And we're trying to talk to her. And separating us was a kitchen table. And what I said to her was, this is something you're going to relate to right away, is that, listen, I was 25 at the time, approximately. I said, I'm 25. I've had multiple failed relationships. I'm alone on Valentine's Day. I'm working. I'm right here with you, blah, blah. And we just talked. And all the time she held on the knife. We couldn't make a move. She said to me, because she could see the heat was getting to me, she goes, are you getting thirsty? You want a glass of water? I'm like, yeah, I do. And she put the knife down, and immediately I kicked the table over, and we got her in custody, and no one was harmed. Yeah, I was hot. I was thirsty, but the thing was, we're using what we were trained to do was our brain. Use your brain more than the gun, because once you go to the gun, you can't back down.
Yeah, I agree. What you use there is what we use a lot. It's called empathy. So by telling her your life story, you relate it to her. That's a perfect technique. As a matter of fact, John, you're so good, we'll put you on our team because I love it.
My policing days are long gone. I'll give you that.
You know what I tell you a quick story. If you don't, you mentioned Baltimore police, which I have a unique kind of connection there. Is when I was a little kid, my dad's family lived in Baltimore. So from Alaska, we do the summer the trip all the way back east. Long trip from Alaska, anywhere really is. And we went there and we wanted to watch the Orioles play, and it was a night game. But my dad didn't have enough money to get me in to the stadium, so he's just going to drive the Alaska kid around the stadium, show him the big ballpark. In Alaska, we don't have any pro sports. We don't have any large stadiums, so I'm always fascinated. And we were in the back of this stadium in probably a closed-off area, and we got stopped either by a Baltimore trooper or PD and said, what are you guys doing? My dad gave the standard story. We're from Alaska. And, of course, that officer was blown away. We were that far away. And why aren't you at the game? So my dad told him, and he said, come park there and come with us. So the back security door, he took us up this set of stairs, and it was late in the game. It may have been 6th, 7th inning. And there's a little deck there where security could watch. And he said, when you leave, the door closes behind itself. It locks. And he left us there for 3 innings to watch this game, my first time in a stadium. I always remembered him because I looked up to him with such praise because in that uniform. He was a good-looking guy. And I think, looking back when I became a cop, I always remembered that little interaction. And I don't even know his name, but wherever he's out there, I want to thank him because that was such a good interaction.
That's awesome.
So kudos to your Baltimore PD.
What year was that approximately?
Gosh, I'm 53 now, so we're going to be, I'm going to be like 10 to 12-ish, I would guess, a long time ago.
Long time ago. So we're talking with Doug Pfeiffer. He is a retired Anchorage, Alaska police officer, author of the book, 50 Shades of True Crime, and his website is dougpfeiffer.com. That's F-I-F-E-R.com. We return, we talk about negotiating the arrest of serial killer Joshua Wade. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app.
Hi, I'm Julie Loken, CEO of the Mediacasters, an omni-media company obsessed with Breakfast with Champions every morning on the Clubhouse social audio app. This inspiring community helps me live a bigger, bolder life. And the best part? BWC is free. Download the Clubhouse social audio app today and join me for your daily dose of inspiration in Breakfast with Champions. Both are free. Online at thebwcinfo.com.
Return conversation with Doug Pfeiffer on the Law Enforcement Talk radio show. Doug is a retired Anchorage, Alaska police officer. He's authored the book 50 Shades of True Crime. His website is dougpfeiffer.com. That's D-O-U-G, common spelling, Doug Pfeiffer, F-I-F-E-R.com. Part of your career, you were a hostage negotiator, and you wound up negotiating successfully the arrest of a serial killer, Joshua Wade. I looked him up before the interview, and I think he confessed to killing 5 people. Am I wrong?
You're right. There's more than that, but he confessed to 5.
There's more than that. Look, 1 is a lot. And I met some killers that were not bad people. I want to say this right now. We got a lot of people in prison that had 10 bad minutes of their life. And then we have some people wasn't for alcohol and drugs. They'd never be in that position. And then you have a few hardcore violent criminals or career criminals that will wreck your day or your life. Joshua Wade sounds like he was the violent career criminal.
Yeah, Joshua Wade was, we'll just classify him as evil. And throughout the career, and from your experience, it's hard to fix evil. And I'm all about rehabilitation. Serial killers, they can't be rehabilitated. So that's one. I actually came in contact with Joshua Wade in 2007. I'd had some prior work on some of his cases. In 2000, he committed his first homicide. What was interesting about that is that the jury acquitted him of that homicide in 2000 and only convicted him of witness tampering, using force to tell others to lie on the witness stand. But the jury didn't convict, which I was fascinated. And for your viewers and listeners from experience, you never know what a jury is going to do.
Never.
The Anchorage Police Department, we knew that Joshua Wade would kill again. So shortly after he was released on his probation and served a short time for witness tampering, in 2007, he committed a second homicide known to Anchorage. The reason why we got on his trail is because a nurse that was murdered came up missing. The next door neighbor who rented a room in this house was Joshua Wade. So we quickly were able to focus in on him. We used bloodhounds from the FBI that tracked an ATM withdrawal with the murdered nurse's ATM card all the way back to Joshua Wade's house on a street which is about a mile and a half away. Fascinating that those dogs can smell that well. I still remember it today on how interesting that was. What happened at that point is we put out, in essence, in Alaska, a manhunt for Josh and searched the city. We couldn't find him. He had lots of associates. About 4 to 5 days later, I received a call that he had broken into an apartment after a short police chase and taken several hostages in that apartment. So I responded to the area with my team. I was able to make contact in the apartment with him. And over the course of a long time, I was able to have him release one of the hostages and then subsequently another hostage. Serial killers like to prey upon victims. They're afraid of any physical contact. And in the end, he was very scared that SWAT would come in, take action. He would be harmed, which was ultimately why he wanted to come out. He wasn't a tough guy unless you were a victim and he could overpower you. So I was able to arrest him post that, also assisted in his interrogation. He received multiple life sentences. An interesting follow-up on that story, as you mentioned, that he confessed to about 5 murders. I think he was good for about 11 or 14 murders.
Wow.
So what I did post-career is I wrote a letter to Joshua Wade in prison. I said, hey, you may not remember me. I'm the negotiator that talked you out, worked with you afterwards. I'd like to talk with you. And my whole intention here was to try and solve those remaining murders. Because as a cop, there's things that weigh on you throughout your career. and there's closure for family. So I thought this may be a way to maybe get some information from him. He already has multiple life sentences. So interestingly enough, he wrote me back. And what I didn't know at the time is that prisoners have access to texting devices, even serial killers, in the facilities, which I found very odd. So I was able to get a separate number and start engaging in conversation with the serial killer. I ended up calling him, recording these conversations live, where he admitted to up to 14 homicides. But what he wanted in trade was a better prison to be out of isolation. He was making demands. I explained to him that I'm going to have some more information to be able to solve these, have our current investigators solve them. So this went on 8-10 hours of contact, text messages, mail, and we worked through some of it, some details, not enough to solve these homicides. And then Joshua Wade OD'd in his cell just in June of this year. And while I have no sympathy for him since he's a serial killer, I am a little bit disappointed that I wasn't able to get over the hump and maybe get some more information to get closure for families. Whether we would have ever got there or not, who knows, because he's a serial killer. And so that was very interesting since it's a post-career, but I used the same tools I had as an officer and as a negotiator to gather information and build that rapport, as strange as it seems, to try and get him to admit to those additional homicides.
The building rapport thing is very important, and I think that's one that a lot of people like to misconstrue, especially in the media. For example, the Charleston, South Carolina killer, where he killed all those people in church, and the officers bought him something to eat, and they're like, "Oh, that shows partiality." No, we had to look. I don't know about you. There were people I wanted to strangle. I wanted to punch out. But you're not allowed to do that. You can't do that. You've got to, number one, you're not going to get good information from them. You're not going to close a case. You're not going to be able to affect arrest. You don't want to be the guy who ruins a case in court. And you've got to become, I hate to say it, friendly with them. Was that the case with you?
Yeah, you are friendly. You're guarded, of course, and they may think you're friendly, but it's very tactical in that. And just put yourself talking to a family member. If they come off rude, arrogant, upfront, pushy, you're going to shut down even with your own family. A suspect's no different. So you have to come across and have empathy, be friendly, build rapport, talk about things other than, we're not just going to focus on the murder. I might talk about your family. I might remind you of the good times. Everybody has good times in their life. So we might talk through those to ease it a little bit to where we need to get. So you can't come on too strong. It's almost like fine-tuning a guitar. It's got to be just right.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing. And I was much better at it the longer I was in police than I was when I first started. So like the good cop, bad cop, the Mutt and Jeff and all that stuff, that never seemed to work. And the old-timers broke me that very, very quickly. We saw that on television all the time, but that was never really something that occurred, especially with homicides and severe violent crimes.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's just what you got to do. I think and I think police are naturally, even whether you're a negotiator or just work patrol or detective, I think we all inherently have some of that gift to talk people through, and we have lots of experience. And again, like I said earlier, your mouth is your biggest tool, and use that, and it de-escalates most situations.
It could also create a lot more problems. Look, I'm an old. I come from the era of revolvers, and when I was sent out, we got a soft body armor, front only, a .38 caliber revolver, mace, which only worked on police and innocent bystanders, and a really big. Well, we were given a really small balsa wood nightstick. We got our own. They're called S-Bantoons because of the way we used them. But the one thing we were always taught, and we're going to take a break, is that your mouth can create more problems or save you from problems. And most police I know got themselves in trouble by saying something stupid, more so than what they did. How accurate is that?
Pretty accurate. And, I'm not immune to that. Learning in your career over 25 years, I'm sure I said some really stupid things that caused something to go on, or maybe not as smooth as it should have been. So I agree with that. I think, again, like you said, with experience, you just keep learning, keep trying to refine your technique, and you get there. I do agree that, as you get older in your career, 10, 15, 20 years, you alter your behavior a little bit. When I was first a street cop, I was not unlike yourself. I was out there raining terror down. I thought I could save society.
Right.
Arresting everybody. It's good stuff, but I think as you evolve, you learn a little bit and you use those techniques.
Well, the old saying was, I came in to save the world, and I'm the one who needs saving at the end. We're talking with Doug Pfeiffer, retired Anchorage police officer, author of the book 50 Shades of True Crime, and his website is dougpfeiffer.com. That's spelled Fifer.com. We're going to take a short break, talk about negotiating the arrest of Israel Keys, another serial killer. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Do you want to be a guest on Law Enforcement Talk Radio show and podcast? It's really quite simple. And before you get into this notion that I'm not a cop, I wasn't a cop, I don't have something to contribute. Well, the show is about investigating crime. That's one aspect of it from the real life perspective of those who did it. And then it's also about trauma, how trauma impacted them, often crime-based, but not always. Our guests quite often are law enforcement officers, other first responders, military, victims of crime, their spouses or survivors, talking about how trauma impacted them, what happened, how it affected their lives, and how they rebuilt their lives after. If you want to be a guest, just contact me. It's really simple. Send an email to jay@letradio.com. That's jay@letradio.com. Or go to letradio.com and the Contact Us page, and you can get me right there as well. Return a conversation on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio show with Doug Pfeiffer, retired Anchorage, Alaska police officer. He's like the third police officer in 7 years I've had from the Alaska area. And he's also authored the book 50 Shades of True Crime, and his website is dougpfeiffer.com. That's spelled Fifer.com. Part of your career, the end of your career, was you were a hostage negotiator, and you and your team were intimately involved in negotiating the arrest of another serial killer, where they seem to be a lot of them in Alaska, Israel Keys. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned a lot of them in Alaska. Per capita, Alaska has the most serial killers on Earth, which is kind of strange. So although it's one of the most beautiful places, it appears to also be one of the most dangerous places.
Yeah, I don't get it. Maybe it's look, nature in itself is extremely violent. Like the story about your brother and the polar bear tracking him. It can be very violent, and it's not always pretty, but there's some reason, I don't know why, some of the best people I ever heard of were in Alaska, and some of the weirdest, most eccentric, and most violent that I've ever heard of come from Alaska.
I wish they didn't, but that's the way it is. So we got to handle each one as we find them. But I think it's the dark winter, I'll be honest with you, 8-9 months of cold, darkness, hard to get outside unless you enjoy cold sports. I think that wears on people mentally. And so if you're on that cusp of breaking, I think a lot of times the weather breaks people, and we see it a lot. It's unfortunate, but it is a long, tough winter in Alaska.
Now let's talk about Israel Keys. I'm looking at Wikipedia, so if it sounds like I know I'm doing this because I'm looking at that. And it says that he murdered at least 3 people, suspected of murdering between 11 and 20 during his career of violent crime. This guy sounds like no joke.
Yeah, we called Israel the devil himself, so it's extreme as you can get. This is a serial killer, which is quite a unique and intriguing story from a law enforcement perspective because it's so odd. So Israel Keys, to give some background information, knew that he had some issues with his brain. He actively thought to himself, my brain's sick, but I can't stop myself from killing, but I know that I shouldn't kill where I live because that's dangerous. So what he would do, he would fly out of state, bury cans with guns, murder tools in the Midwest states, fly back to Alaska, a month or two later, fly down there with all in cash tickets, dig these weapons up, rent a car with cash, drive across the U.S., and commit homicides. From a law enforcement perspective, without motive and something to tie an individual to, it's very difficult to solve those. He did, I hate to say it, he did a very good job in his homicides. So he went on a tear for many years. How many he killed? It's going to be hard to tell. We won't ever know, probably. But what happened in his interview, he admitted that his brain started taking over. He couldn't stop that urge to kill, even at home, even in Alaska. He knew he shouldn't. There was a coffee barista. She was an 18-year-old. So he kidnapped her from the coffee shop, bound her, took her to a shed that he had in his backyard. He also had a girlfriend and a child that lived in the house. Unbeknownst to them, there was a kidnapped victim in his shed. subsequently murdered her, after doing heinous crimes. And then it was February in Alaska. It's always freezing. That's one of our coldest months. Can easily get 20 below zero. Fairbanks can get 60, 70 below zero. But in Anchorage, he left her in that shed, which would freeze anything solid. And then he went on a Caribbean cruise for a few weeks. Nonchalant, didn't have a care in the world. We had a massive manhunt for the barista. Obviously, she was 18. She was missing. We couldn't find her. We had no clues. It made no sense. Most law enforcement, after 12 hours, between us, we think that the victim is probably dead. Kidnappings usually don't last longer than that.
Right.
Weeks out, we presume she's most certainly dead. The unique twist in this case, we really had no leads. We were thrown for a complete loop. What had happened is we received a picture of the victim with a ransom note of $30,000. It was a Polaroid picture, and then they took our local Alaskan newspaper and put it next to her. So kind of the date showed that she was still alive. Now, internally, as law enforcement, we questioned the photo. It just didn't look right, but not enough that we could say for sure that she was dead. So the family took $5,000, deposited in her account. And keep in mind, the serial killer asked that we deposit the money into the victim's account. This is highly unusual. He may say drop money off in a trash can, put it in an offshore account, but it's rare that you'd put it in the victim's account.
Right.
So as law enforcement, we immediately pivoted. Is the family involved? Is maybe the victim even involved? And even though that may sound callous, you can't dismiss anything because stranger things have happened.
Right.
We started to get ATM withdrawals in Anchorage. The bank notified us on that $5,000. We immediately mobilized. I was one of the officers that would rush to the ATM. Suspect would be gone. We grabbed the tape. We had images of a male suspect on these ATM tapes, but we couldn't quite identify who he was. This went on for a few weeks, and then it stopped. So no victim, and now we have no more suspect activity for several weeks. Fast forward to the lower 48, we started getting ATM withdrawals in Arizona. The last one was in Texas. We notified authorities. One of the ATM cameras caught the back plate of a rental vehicle. One of the troopers in Texas was able to find that vehicle leaving the area and stopped it. In the vehicle was the serial killer, and also was the victim's phone, debit card. No victim, of course. He initially denied any involvement in the homicide. Search warrants were granted by the courts. Obviously, we went to the house. There was no body in the shed at this time. We interviewed and interrogated Israel Keys. One of my buddies from my academy was the main detective on this case, a fabulous interrogator. He was able to get admissions from the serial killer, who had cut the body up and put it in one of our local lakes. This is wintertime, so the lake's frozen. We went out and we were able to recover her body. Subsequently, he admitted to many more of these homicides throughout the U.S., and they were checking them off one by one, verifying these murders. And then ultimately, he committed suicide in the jail. Jailers, they weren't supposed to, but they gave a razor blade for him to shave. He used that razor blade and bed sheets to commit suicide. So we never got those final victims who he killed, and we may never know.
Well, I'm glad you got him. I wish that, and one of the things that we talk about, in particular with some friends of mine in retired Baltimore police, is it's summer homicide it's not the cases we can solve that keep us up at night. It's the ones we couldn't solve. And quite often we know who did it, but we couldn't get this pesky thing called evidence or probable cause. So I appreciate your efforts, your team's efforts, and the other people's efforts. And sometimes it may feel like it's in vain, but it's well appreciated. So you retired, and then you eventually decided, hey, I'm going to write a book. It's called 50 Shades of True Crime. What possessed you to do that?
It's pretty simple. Throughout my career, like cops do at dinner parties or office parties, or even cop training conferences, we'd always get to, what's the weirdest story in your community? Like your police department, where do you work? What's the weirdest thing? Inevitably, and it may sound a little strange for cops, it would lead towards deviant sex. And the reason being is because that's the oddest, weirdest thing that you can.
Oh, as police, you see it too. You get the calls for it all the time.
You see it. So it's just so strange that we would inevitably go there. Not that solving homicides aren't cool or robberies, they are, but we'd always tend to go there. And we talk about them. And then even at parties with non-law enforcement, people would really dig into the details of deviant sexual crimes, more so than they might on a homicide. They would always tell me, you should write a book about some of these stories in Alaska. And I was like, nobody's going to want that or read it. That's an odd book. But the more and more I heard that, and the more stories over 25 years that I accumulated, I was like, this may be a book that people are interested in. So these are the most hardcore deviant sexual crimes in Alaska. I'd say about 80% of the book are Alaska cases. The vast majority are mine. And the others are cases I was quasi-involved in with other agencies throughout the U.S. or at training conferences. But it's very unique. It's a different twist on true crime. It's not going to be your traditional read. But if you want to see what's behind closed doors from your neighbors, what your coworkers do, maybe even what your bosses do, this might be the book for you.
Can you get details about the book and contact you at your website?
Yeah, the DougPfeiffer.com. You can go there. You can watch the book trailer. It's based in Alaska. It's, all the themed. So that's a good watch. And then the book, again, available on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, wherever you like.
And the website, a little more time, is DougPfeiffer.com. That's spelled Fifer.com. Doug, thanks so much for your service, and thanks for being a guest on the show. Very much appreciated.
Well, thanks for having me, and thank you for your service.
I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or two or three. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.